Welcome everyone. Today I am joined by Bandar Alsharif of the Organization Against Zionism and Racism. Initially, we planned on making this an interview about the history and geopolitical interests behind Zionism, but in the light of the recent events in Syria, where the government of Bashar al-Assad has fallen as of the date of recording, we will discuss this event and its relation to Zionism and the Palestinian struggle. So, welcome, thanks for joining me. Can you first give some overview of the history of the Arab Zionist struggle in relation to Syria to contextualize what has happened today?
Thank you for the host. First, we are in a very difficult situation today. We are in an uncertain situation. Everything is fresh. We don't know what's going to happen in the next coming days. But firstly, to understand where we are standing today, we have to speak a little bit about the Arab Zionist historical background of struggle. So, starting with the establishment of the Zionist entity, we know that the Zionist entity is getting its power, its ability of standing from external countries, external support. It's not standing by itself. It's not self-standing. The Zionist entity established for a cause, which is separating the Arab region between East and West and creating this buffer zone demographically and geographically with this huge number of settlers in the heart of the Arab region in Palestine, in this small piece of land between the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. So the Arab region will never be united anymore. So if we understand the reason of establishment of this Zionist entity, we understand all the struggle in the region, in the Arab region, not with the Zionist entity directly. Also, you will understand the struggle happening inside each country by itself and how the imperialism divided the Arab countries into 22 countries, working on the ethnic differences, religious differences, sometimes depending on nothing, basically, with drawing the borders between Arab countries. Since the beginning, the imperialism, the colonialism worked on establishing following regimes in the Arab countries, mainly kingdoms and emirates, to rule the Arab countries in the name of the Western colonization. So what happened that they succeeded in most of the countries that they created with their royal families they established in each region, in each country, but they failed in some countries. Levant, for example, divided between Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine after the World War I. Iraq became a separate state. Establishment of Saudi Arabia, the Emirates of the Gulf, isolating Egypt, let's say, and occupying it, of course. Between the two world wars, the Arab region became more and more divided. So the Western colonization worked on making the countries more divided and separating the people socially from each other, to convince the people that this border is a fact, this border is your destiny, and you will never be united anymore. In the 50s and the 60s, there was high awareness in the Arab region about the Arab unity, the liberation, and in this period of time after the World War II and the beginning of the liberation, or let's say the it's not a real liberation, let's say the basic liberation that they give to Arab countries and the third world countries, they start to, as I said, putting in the rule the governments of royal kingdoms to continue the colonization through this regimes. Sorry. So what they did is giving a fake independent to these countries with regimes that ruling in the name of the colonization.
So political independence, but not economic independence, right?
Not economic and not real independent. Even the political independent, it's not real, it's fake. But as I said, they succeeded in most countries and failed in some. But the struggle is not ending. In 1952, there was a revolution in Egypt. Gamal Abdel Nasser came to the power and took off the throne of the king Farouk. This was an earthquake in the region and the world. It affected in all the third world countries, the countries who didn't independ yet. They all get lots of support, emotional support from the revolution in Egypt in 1952 because it came in early time in 1952. And this gave lots of power to the liberation powers and parties in the Arab region and raised lots of awareness that people, they felt that there's a hope. Egypt is rising, Egypt is liberated in a real, not in a fake liberation, and they felt that they can rise with Egypt. And we saw the rising of the thought of the Arab nationalist, the Arab unity, all these symbols was in the radio stations, in the streets, in the demonstrations. As I said, in the time of 50s and 60s, there was lots of awareness, high awareness to the Arab people, everybody following one leader, which is Gamal Abdel Nasser. Of course, not all regimes was happy with that. Syria was good with Egypt. We witnessed unity between Syria and Egypt in 1958. As a result of this unity, we saw the throne getting down in Iraq. We saw the government of Camille Chamhoun in Lebanon falling down. And we saw lots of fear in the royalty countries, like in the Gulf countries, in North Africa. Everybody was terrified from Abdel Nasser and from the unity happened between Syria and Egypt. And now we will talk why this unity didn't work, didn't continue. Of course, the comparisons between the Arab regimes and the colonization never stopped. They work on, falling this unity apart. Iraq was prevailed on the royalty, and they announced the republic. But this situation didn't continue for a long time, unfortunately. It remained for 3 years and a half between 1958 till 1961, when the kingdom in Saudi Arabia, they played a role in kicking out the Egyptians from Syria by a military movement and announced the dividing between Syria and Egypt again.
Because for clarity, for this period, Egypt and Syria were one state, which was called the United Arab Republic, right?
The United Arab Republic, right, between 1958 and 1961. And during this time, there was a unity of parliament, and they was working still on uniting the associations between the two countries to make one country. And the main region that the dividing succeeded, and the military movement in Syria succeeded in kicking out the Egyptians and separate Syria again from Egypt. The main region is there's a buffer state between Syria and Egypt. Geographically, they are not one, they are not united, they are not attached together because in between there's a Zionist entity. And here is the reason of the establishment of this Zionist entity. It's not about religious stories or myths that they are talking about. It's all used as a reason just uh, to justify the Zionist movement and to uh, bring the Zionist or the Jewish of the world and convince them to come to the land of the peace, land of the promise, and all this stuff. So we have here a live example on why they established the Zionist entity. And we are suffering till now from dividing the Arab countries between each other because of this entity. In Syria, it was unestablished situation, lots of regimes coming and falling, lots of wars, of course, till we reach the 1967, the catastrophe of 1967, when the Zionist entity, with support of France and the West in general, occupied the massive land of Egypt, Syria, and the West Bank. Here, they occupied all Palestine. And by the way, West Bank is a very important and basic need to the Zionist entity to remain and to continue because it gives the deep geographic land for them to defend their national security. Without West Bank, they have no geography, they have no demography even to expand in Palestine and expand in the region. So the minimum limit of the Zionist entity to continue and to live is to have a West Bank, like the 100% of historical Palestine. Less than that, no, they won't accept. The Americans won't accept. This is the minimum of keeping the Zionist entity alive.
And why is the West Bank specifically important? Is it just for living space? Because, of course, for example, the Sinai Desert could also be used to construct settlements if it were taken by the Zionist entity. But is the West Bank, is there also cultural reasons or in terms of water reserves or natural resources?
Actually, it's not about national resources. It's not about reserves. The main thing is about geography. The deep geography limit to support or to save their national security. And without this deepness, without this, they can't defeat the Zionist entity. Here, if we look at the map, you see the West Bank in the gray and the 48 lands in white. If you look here at this chart, this is very, very small geographically, and in a matter of military, you can't defend this very short space. So to defend this 15 or 20 kilometers, militarily, it's impossible. That's why West Bank is basic need to the continuous of the Zionist entity. And that show us that the two-state solution is a myth, because without West Bank, there will be no Israel. So the situation all changed after 1967, and all the talk about the Arab nationalism fall down. People start to see the Arab nationalism as a failing project.
Because it was defeated by the Zionists?
Because it was defeated by the Zionists, but the defeat was military defeat. It was clear, it was huge defeat, but it was militarily. And here is the difference between the military defeat and the political defeat. If the military defeat led to a political defeat, here you can say, yeah, you are defeated. But if you still have the will to fight and to struggle, to continue the struggle, you're not defeated. Even if they destroy your army, even if they destroy your ability, your resources, if you have the will, you will continue. 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, it doesn't matter. Direct after the Six Days War in 1967, there was a top meeting for the Arab leaders in Sudan, and the result of the top was the three no's: no recognition, no normalization, no negotiation. So these three no's showed the Zionist entity and the world that the Arabs still insisting to fight back, even we have a military defeat. And here they start to work on Egypt internally, and they push Gamal Abdel Nasser to put Anwar Sadat as his deputy, and after that they killed him in 1970 by poison. And there's many stories say that Anwar Sadat, he put the poison for Gamal Abdel Nasser in the coffee, and the death of Gamal Abdel Nasser was the real defeat, not the 6 Days War. Because Gamal Abdel Nasser said that we have the will and we will keep struggling, we'll keep fighting back, we are rebuilding our military. And between 1967 and 1970, in these 3 years, they built a big part of the Egyptian army, and they was basically ready to fight back. But the death of Gamal Abdel Nasser changed everything. Sadat was insisting on the political defeat after the military defeat, but he wanted to uh, justify the defeat, the political defeat, by making it more beautiful with getting or restoring the Egyptian land in Sinai, justifying the defeat with the negotiation with the Americans and the Zionists, and to convince the Egyptian people and the Arab people of the political defeat, what they call peace. They have to start or launch a war. This war to move things, not to liberate. So the historical people in Arab region, they call the 1973 war, it's a war for movement, not a war for liberation. They just wanted to shake the fire and make like kind of movement to the region and the world. And they said, we are here and we are ready to negotiate. We are not ready to liberate. So this is the difference between Sadat in Egypt and Gamal Abdel Nasser, which is 180-degree round from the Gamal Abdel Nasser political views. And this is, for me, I consider this is the real defeat, which is the political defeat. When you don't have the will to fight, you only fight to improve your negotiations situations. And this is what Anwar Sadat worked on since the day one. And this is why they brought Anwar Sadat to the power in Egypt. So this was the first disaster or the first catastrophe happened in the Arab region after we lost Jamal Abdel Nasser. Of course, Syria was ruled by Hafez al-Assad, the father of Bashar al-Assad today. And he got an offer from Sadat to join the negotiation, join the peace. He told him that together we'll be more strong in the negotiation. We will negotiate with the Zionist entity. The Zionist entity is a fact. They will remain. But you lost Golan Heights, I lost Sinai. Let's get them back and make normalization with Israel and accept it as a fact and forget about the Arab unity and all this talk. So here, Hafez al-Assad, Bashar al-Assad's father, he refused the offer. And when he was in Syria, some of the leaders in the Syrian regime, they wanted to make an action against Sadat, but Hafez al-Assad refused, and he said he is a leader of the biggest Arab countries, and we can't do anything about it. If you want to go for negotiation and give them Palestine, he can do that, but we are not. This is Syria that in the American and the Zionist glasses, let's say, or screen. They screen Syria as the country or the regime who didn't normalize, who didn't recognize, the regime who remain on the principles of Jamal Abdel Nasser of not selling Palestine, and they insist that Palestine is part of Great Syria, historical Syria. And the liberation of Palestine is our main principle. Of course, the Syrian regime is not a perfect regime, but at least he's a patriotic. Since Hafez al-Assad to Bashar al-Assad, they are the ones who never signed. They are the ones who never sold Palestine as other Arab countries. They are the ones who never normalized. Syria and Lebanon, it's the only countries in the what we call the surrounding countries of the Zionist entity who never normalize, and they have no Israeli flag on their skies, no embassies, no recognizing. And what they do, they have, of course, a very hard situation after they lost Egypt. Losing Egypt was a real disaster. It's worse than Six-Day War. So what they did in 1979, they have this alliance with Iran after the revolution in Iran, not to fight Israel, just to stand still and support the resistance, because the main war between Syria and the Zionist entity, it's not logical because there is no balance. With Egypt, you have balance. You barely have balance. When you lose Egypt, which is the main power in the region, you lost almost everything. So the Syrian government decided to have this situation of no war and no peace. And they stayed on this limit. This policy that Hafez al-Assad started, they call it the edge policy, that you are standing on the edge, you're not falling, but you are not stable yet. So they remain at this situation for 40 years of Hafez al-Assad ruling. Of course, during this year, Syria faced lots of introductions from the CIA. In 1982, there was lots of Islamic groups, Muslim Brotherhood specifically. They start to make bombs and fight in Syria. And here I want to share to the Turkish rule in Syria. Since 1958, the unity between Syria and Egypt came as a result of the Turkish threat from the north in 1958. After the unity, the threat was gone from Turkey. After they divided it's okay, Jamal Abdel Nasser is still here, Syria is still protected after the Sadat and the negotiation with the Zionist entity and the normalization. Syria start to feel like an unstable situation, so they have to make this alliance with Iran. They have no choices. Of course, in policy, there's no much choices. It's not a supermarket. You can choose what you want. It's a political situation and balance. You have to work on balance and alliances. Without alliances, you will be perished. So Syria is not that big country because Syria basically losing Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, and losing big part of historical Syria to the Turks, occupied by the Turks. So Syria is not the Syria that we know that historically Syria is. So Syria is not that big country or strong country. They barely can stand still. So they put this policy of the edge and they remain on this political situation. What they did is supporting the resistance, the militia resistance in Lebanon and Palestine.
How did they support them? Giving arms or money or diplomatic support or?
Actually, arms and money and training and manufacturing of weapons in Syria. They gave the resistance of Lebanon, the national resistance, before the Islamic resistance, before the 1982, and during the 1982, and after that, they adopted the Palestinian resistance of the PLO. The PLO, they have their own camps in Syria. The only country in the world gave them camps, or the only government, because they have camps in Lebanon, but there was no government in Lebanon. In Syria, they have a shelter. In Syria, they have manufacturers of weapons. They have training. They give them infrastructure to work against the Zionist entity. So the operations of the resistance, Palestinian resistance and Lebanese resistance, was starting and planning in Syria. And we remember in the 70s and the 80s, all the hijacking of the planes, the operations against the Israeli embassies, the operations all over the world and inside the Zionist entity, inside the military bases, the bombing, the kidnapping. It's all was supported by Syria, Syria of Hafiz al-Assad. That's why Syria suffered from terrorism during the period of 1972 to 1982, when Hafiz al-Assad he destroyed the militias of the Muslim Brotherhood, destroyed all this terrorist organization coming from Turkey as well. So the Turkish role is old in Syria. We're talking from the 50s till the 60s, till the 70s, till the 80s, till today. The Turkey is a threat to Syria till now. So what they did, that they work on like unstabilize Syria by bombing and by Muslim Brotherhood. But Hafiz al-Assad, he know how to deal with these terrorist groups, and he know how to control the country and make it stable again. Between 1982 till 2011, Syria was stable. They were stable socially, economically. They were stable kind of politically, we can say. When Bashar al-Assad came to the power, also everything was stable. But, you know, conspiracies are coming from all over the region, from the States, from Turkey, to unstabilize Syria again and push the government to normalize with Israel. When Bashar al-Assad came to the power in year 2000, the Americans and the Zionists was optimistic that, oh, he's a young man, he's going to change the old policy, and he's going to normalize with Israel. And the main thing that they want from Syria, the main thing, is stop arming the resistance of Hezbollah in Lebanon, because Hezbollah now is the biggest threat to the Zionist entity. In the 90s, the Hezbollah resistance make a huge guerrilla war against the Zionist entity, against the military bases in south of Lebanon, and they reached the land of Palestine, who occupied in 1948, and they still fighting all the period of 90s to reach the year 2000, the year of liberation of south of Lebanon, which is proud of Lebanon and the Arab, that for the first time in the Arab struggle with the Zionist entity, for the first time, the Zionist entity is withdrawn from an Arab land without negotiation, under the military push. And this all was because of Syria. Without Syria, no liberation of south of Lebanon and no support to the resistance of Hezbollah in Lebanon, because Syria is the only way and the only supporter and the main supporter to the Hezbollah. Without Syria, no Hezbollah. Without Syria, no resistance. So during this time, of course, the PLO, of course, they signed the Oslo in 1993, and the Syrians was not happy with that, of course. But the Syrians took the alternative way of supporting Hamas and Al-Jihad al-Islami, the Palestinian battalions who refused Oslo and refused the negotiation and refused to recognize the Zionist entity as a state. And they insisted on keep fighting back till getting back all Palestine.
And the infrastructure that Syria had to support Palestine that you mentioned, so arms manufacturing, training camps, etc., did this remain throughout this entire period, and until when?
What happened that after 1993, after Oslo, they just replaced the PLO with Hamas and Al-Jihad al-Islami.
So they still hosted the Palestinian resistance in that way.
Exactly. And the leadership of Hamas, Khalid Mash'al, he was located in Damascus and supported by Damascus. And there was lots of operations to assassinate him, and the Syrian intelligence uncovered that and exposed the trials. And they supported Hamas. They are supporting Hamas and Al-Jihad al-Islami and Hezbollah because they are threatening the Zionist entity. And this is the only choice on the Syrians, because if you don't want to normalize, and if you don't want to sell Palestine, you have to do something. So you have to support the resistance, the militia resistance, because you can't fight as an army because there's no balance. They will wipe Syria out. So it's the only choice to ally with Iran, to ally with the resistance movements in the region. And without that, you can't stand still. You're just supporting the resistance, because we can't fight Israel as a classic war, but we can do through resistance. And the resistance they need back. And the back should be a country, a government to support this resistance. And this is what Syria did. And this is what Syria remained doing until 2024. They never let go their responsibilities toward the resistance. They didn't knee or bend the knee on the push. The push and the when the Americans was convincing Bashar al-Assad to stop aiming the resistance, they used the stick and the carrot. So we'll give you this, we'll give you economy, we'll give you investments and the heaven of Syria, but you have to stop your relation with the resistance and make normalization with Israel, and we will give you even the Golan Heights, but not all the land of Golan Heights. We will stop after 500 meters from the Lake of Galil, of Tiberia, because water is very important to Israel. So we'll give you the Golan Heights without Tiberia Lake, and this is the maximum that you can have.
And when was this offered?
This offer made in the 90s by Bill Clinton, and he said to Hafiz al-Assad, I came for you with an offer you can't refuse. Like 90%, 95% of the Golan Heights, just you will give the Israeli 500 meter of land after the Galilee Sea or the Tiberias Lake. The same offer came to Bashar al-Assad, this time after 2003, after the falling of Saddam Hussein in Iraq. Of course, the push was huge at that time. 300,000 American soldiers on your borders in Iraq. They taking down Baghdad in 19 days. A huge force. You can't resist. You can't, fight back. They are threatening you. And at the same time, they are giving you a carrot. Just stop your relation with the resistance, recognize Israel, and you live in heaven. And this is what Olmert said also in 2006. He said after when Ehud Olmert was the prime minister of the Zionist entity, he said in an interview, if Bashar al-Assad accepted to make a normalization and peace with me, he will never face any revolution or any fight or any terrorism in Syria. Syria will live in peace and with a good economy, with lots of investments and prosperity and all these things. So the offers never stop coming to Syria, especially after Bashar al-Assad came to the power. So threatened by the American army, we took Iraq, you are next. So what he did, he stood still.
So if Assad would have sold out the Palestinians in 2003 or whenever, then today he would probably be supported and loved by the West.
100%. 100%. It's not about dictatorship.
No.
All the Arab regimes supported by the Americans, they are dictators. They are not respecting their countries. They are not respecting their people, and they are not respecting the rights of the people.
Saudi Arabia doesn't even have elections.
No elections, no parliament in the
No.
first place. And so on all the Gulf countries. So they are all supported by the US and armed by the US and spoiled by the US. So it's not about dictatorship, it's about your political views, your political standing. You are supporting the resistance or not, you are good with the Zionist entity or not, because the Zionist entity is a need for the Western imperialism. They can't lose it because it's the only buffer zone between the Arab countries. It's the barrier who stop the Arab unity. And I talked about an example in 1961 when Egyptians couldn't reunion with Syria because of the geography. And this is the main reason of the existence of Zionist entity. So we are talking about lots of push, lots of threaten to Syria, and lots of offers. You can choose heaven or hell. So Syria chose Palestine and chose their lands, not to give you their land to the occupation. And they paid a high price between 2011 till now, 2024. This high price paid by the regime and the people, but when you work on the awareness of the people, it's hard to load the people with your thoughts for a long time. You can do that in the peacetime, in the prosperity time, but when there is war, it's hard. When there's economical siege on Syria, and we all know about Caesar sanctions on Syria in 2019. It's the same story happening with Iraq. Iraq was sanctioned between 1990 and 2003, 13 years. They bend on their knees. People, they can't find food, they can't find basic needs, no electricity, no food, no gas. So it was easier for the Americans to take down the Baghdad in 19 days. And now we are witnessing the same scenario. The same scenario. The situation in Syria in the last 5 years was so hard, so hard. People are coming from there. They said people are getting a salary of $20, and the prices are not cheap. People are living on bread and water. People are unhappy. They are sad. It's very, very hard situation.
Do you think this also played a role in why, as we've seen over the last couple of days, in many cases the army refused to fight because, well, there's literally no or very little to support life in the current situation. So it's not really an order many people in this point in time are willing to put their lives on the line for.
Exactly, and this is what I'm talking about. To fight for what to fight for. If you are strong militarily and you don't have the will to fight, you are defeated. This is what I'm talking about. If there's will, there's way. But if you lose the will, if you lose the passion, you are on a dark tunnel. You see yourself hungry, your family is starving, they're suffering from everything, no heat in the winter, no basic needs. People, they compare their life between before 2011 and 2024. It's a huge difference. It was heaven. Syria was living the best days in 2010.
I believe Syria had the highest living standard in the Middle East before 2011.
In a way or another, if you talk about the ability of buying stuff, the value of the currency in Syria, you can buy lots of things with few money because everything coming from inside the country. They are depending on themselves, on agriculture, on even petrol, in manufacturing. Syria was living the best days in 2010 economically, socially. By the way, Syria have before 2011 the best social freedom situation in the Arab regions. You are free to choose your religion. You are free to choose your lifestyle. You are free to do whatever you want by choosing the way of living that you want better than any Arab country. So all this should be destroyed. They wanted to destroy Syria, destroy the will of the Syrian people, and they succeeded by the sanctions to bring the Syrian people not believing in their government and not believing in the future of Syria with this government. And people in general, they want to experience, they want to try something else. They reach a level of living they can't take it anymore. It's very, very hard. So after all this push and all this encouragement from the West to the Syrian government, and they are insisting on fighting back and supporting and backing the resistance and keeping the alliance with Iran and Yemen and Iraq and the axis of resistance, nothing succeed with Syria. So they, after the sanctions, of course, it was much easier to take the regime falling down. Unfortunately, this is what we witnessed this morning. for the national level, it's a disaster. We don't know where we are standing now. We don't know what is what next, what's coming. We are in an uncertain situation. Jordan is also threatened by what they call rebels in Syria, because it's radical Islamic groups. You can't control 100%. You can't. You don't know what's coming, what next, what they are planning to, or what they are going to do. You can't expect their reactions. That's why, for Jordan, for example, it's not safe. For the Zionist entity, they are so happy because they are getting off their basic enemy, the Bashar al-Assad regime, and they are looking for Israeli embassy in Damascus. And I think with the scenario that we are living, this is what's going to happen in Syria soon. We'll see normalization in a very short time. The uncertain thing is about the Kurds in the east of Euphrates River. We don't know what's going there, or what's going to happen there. We don't know the American plans yet.
Yeah, I believe that, and maybe you've seen this already, one of the leaders in one of these rebel groups or jihadist groups in Syria gave an interview for Israeli media where he basically said, "Oh, don't worry, we send our greetings to the friendly people of Israel. We support Israel." So this supposedly like Islamist warrior is completely friendly to the entity that is responsible for the deaths of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of Muslims in Gaza. So that's the kind of people who are currently taking over power in Syria. And I believe that there's mainly three reasons that are given for the civil war in Syria starting in 2011. So the first is to build a natural gas pipeline from the Gulf states to Europe, which Syria did not want to participate in. The second is because what you mentioned, the economic system in Syria, which is basically a successful Arab form of socialism, which forms an alternative way of structuring the economy and society to what the West prescribes under neoliberalism. And the third is, of course, Palestine, like you mentioned. So you said until 2024, so until today, these support networks for the Palestinian resistance have existed within Syria. So what do you think this event, the toppling of the Assad government, what will be the effect of that on the Palestinian struggle?
Thank you for mentioning the pipeline and the social situation plus the Palestinian issue. Actually, since 2011, the Syrian opposition is sending signs and signals to the Zionist entity and the states to show them that we are the ones who will make normalization with Israel. We are the ones you can rely on us on making the normalization and in the war situation with Israel. And we are the ones who will bring security to the Zionist entity. And we are the one who will stop arming the resistance. Also, we will fight the resistance for you. So they put themselves on the opposite direction of the Syrian regime, because they know why they are existed, to take off this regime, and they know who established this armed resistance or armed opposition of Syria. So they work on that. At the beginning in 2011, they brought a character, a Syrian professor in Sorbonne University in France, called Burhan Ghalioun, and they put him a leader of the opposition, and he said that we are ready to make a normalization of Israel with Israel, and the Zionist entity, they should not be afraid from the jihadis, because We are going to make normalization. We are coming to take off Assad from power only. We didn't come to liberate Palestine. And we saw lots of leaders of the Syrian opposition visiting the Zionist entity, visiting conferences, and talking about the situation in Syria and how we will make peace with the Zionist entity and all this stuff. It's going on since 2011, and we saw Israeli journalists leaking inside north of Syria to the territories that the Syrian opposition is controlling, making interviews with the Syrian opposition fighters. And he said, I am Jewish, I am Israeli. Do you want to do anything bad to me? They said, no, of course, we have no problem with you. Our problem only with Assad. And they kept give this feelings to the Zionists and the Americans to keep the support for them and the arm and all the support from the US to them, and they put themselves in the opposite direction of Assad. So what we are witnessing today is the normalization. We lost Syria from the struggle. It's a hard situation now. The resistance in Lebanon will be in a bad situation. The resistance in Palestine will be in a bad situation, or worse, we can say. We don't know exactly where we are going, but it's certain that we lost Syria because of all the push happened by the United States, and it's all going in the benefit of the Zionist entity. It's not easy. The situation is hard. The event is huge. It's something we will keep remembering for generations. That's why I'm telling you that we are in an uncertain situation, but the vision is not glory. It's black.
Yeah. And of course, making predictions is difficult, especially when they're about the future. But do you think that the Zionist entity will make use of this opportunity to restart their assault on Lebanon? Because we can assume, I think, that Hezbollah will now be in disarray because their support and supply lines are disrupted, and it will take some time to reconfigure this, because of course it's difficult for Iran to get material aid into Hezbollah without the support of Syria. So do you think that this will be an opportunity that the Zionist entity will exploit to attack right now that Hezbollah is not able or less able to resist?
I think attack the Zionist on Lebanon is a matter of time, because after the 7th of October, we witness a different Zionist entity. They changed. They are not like before. We saw much more brutality. We saw much more insisting on fighting. We saw a 14 months war, which is something never happened in the history of the struggle since 100 years. All their wars was relying on short wars, because their internal front, they can't take a long war. But after 7th of October, everything changed. We are fighting and facing a different enemy. They remove their skin, and there's a dragon coming out of the skin. There was in a skin of a weasel or a fox, and now they are a dragon. So they are able to accept losses more than before. They are able to accept long war more than before, and they're insisting to crush their enemies more than before. That's why I'm telling you that the attack on Lebanon is a matter of time. After all this succeed they did in Syria, they will never stop. They will continue. And not only Lebanon, even Iran is in danger. But we don't know what's going on in the background of the policy. We are watching and waiting. Of course, the Lebanon is not in a best situation, but in Lebanon, there's a strong resistance. We are talking about 100,000 fighters, radical fighters for their rights against the occupation of their land and Palestinian land. Of course, there's some Lebanese land occupied in Shab'a and the seven villages that the Zionist entity occupying since 1948. So they are defending their land and their dignity and their security because they don't want the threat of Israel. They just want to make a balance between Lebanon and Israel so the Zionists don't demolish Beirut again. So we are relying now on Hezbollah. Hezbollah is still strong. They lost their leaders, but they recover, and we're relying on this recovery. They have large number of trained fighters. They have a huge armory of weapons and rockets. They can threat Israel. They're not going to be easy game. So still with the change with the Zionist entity, the Lebanese will be hard to swallow. And I think they will make a hard situation to the Zionist entity. It's not going to be easy. If it's living or death war, it's going to be very hard on the Zionists. And we don't know what the coming days is hiding for us. But the fight in Lebanon is certain. It's just a matter of time. And the one who will attack is the Zionist entity. And the one who will defeat or defend themselves is the Lebanese. The Lebanese are they have the will of fighting. They never get defeated militarily or politically. So they are still standing still and still keeping their power. Of course, they will be affected by cutting the aid from Iran through Syria, but inside Lebanon, there's a huge power of Hezbollah. We don't know what's going to happen. It's a game of biting fingers, who will scream first, and we depend on the resistance because the resistance in Lebanon is backing the resistance in Palestine, not only in Gaza, in West Bank as well. We hear about lots of smuggling from Syria and Lebanon, smuggling weapons to the West Bank. The West Bank itself, even it's surrounded with from everywhere, but the Lebanese are backing the resistance. Lots of fighters going out of Palestine in a way or another to get training and get back. Getting training in Lebanon, as many reports talking about. So the story is not end yet. But we don't know exactly what's going to happen in near future.
Let's also talk about Syria itself a little more, because, of course, the HTS group, so it's like the abbreviation for Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, right?
Yes.
So they right now seem to be the most powerful faction within Syria, but it is still very much a divided country, right? There is no unity in Syria right now. So there's areas which are controlled by this group. The northeast is controlled by the Kurds. The north is controlled by pro-Turkish militias. The southeast is controlled by pro-US militias. There's, I believe, still some areas which are controlled by ISIS. And then there's even other factions as well. So do you think that now that Assad is out of power, there will be a sort of government of national unity forged out of all these groups? Or will Syria descend into a situation that is more looking like what has happened to Libya since the government was overthrown there?
Okay, that's correct. Actually, it's ripping out to many parts. I'm talking about Syria, and it happened since 2012. In 2012, the Syrian opposition itself is not united, and during the last 13 years, we witnessed a big fight and huge battles between the Syrian opposition battalions, the terrorist groups, the jihadists, because each one of these groups or each group of groups of this mosaic of hundreds of groups, terrorist groups in Syria, each group of groups are supported by a certain country, like some supported by Qatar, some supported by Saudi Arabia, some supported by the United States, and so on. So these groups faced lots of battles, lots of fight. We are talking about tens of thousands of terrorist fighters got killed in the battle between each other. It's not a small number. We're talking about wars between the terrorist groups, what they call themselves the Syrian opposition. We faced battles between the Islamics and the Kurds, and the Islamics among themselves many times. Many battles happened, and that all benefited the Syrian regime in Damascus to manage the battle or manage the war. So they managed the war, the Syrian government, through using this differences between the groups, encouraging this group against the other. They have no rules, they have no ethics, they just attacking each other's villages and raping, killing, robbing, everything. The Syrian people, especially on the land that the Syrian government lost, the people, the civilians in these regions, they suffered a lot from the lack of security, the terrorists controlling their lands, their villages, their cities, their neighborhoods. It was a massive chaos. And the disaster on the people that even these groups are fighting each other. We're talking about tens of thousands killed by these groups. We are talking about ISIS, Al-Nusra, which is Al-Qaeda. We're talking about Muslim Brotherhood, many battalions. We are talking about hundreds of groups. It make a cocktail, a mosaic that in some people they didn't understand what's going on. Who's fighting who? Groups are joining each other and fighting other groups, and then they are separating again and joining their old groups and fighting back. So it was a huge chaos in the last 13 years. And now the situation is different because we see the last 10 days, we saw the Syrian opposition as one group by look. Like we saw that they are one group fighting the Syrian army or just taking the areas without fight. So these groups, they seems as one, but it's impossible to be one group because they have 13 years of history of fighting. 13 years of killing each other. They have revenges on each other. They have lots of blood on all of them, all of their hands. So it's not easy or it's impossible that these groups will unite in one group. And we heard this morning about fighting between the jihadists and the Kurds, which is make the whole situation more complicated because of the American bases on the east and the southeast and the northeast. So this all make the situation more complicated. The chaos that happening or expected to be happening more and more in Syria is something that Americans will encourage. They want the Syrians to fight each other. They don't want stability unless they want to make the normalization with Zionist entity, but I think they don't want a united Syrian government to make a normalization with the Zionist entity. They want to separate Syria to different entities, and one by one, they will make a normalization with Israel. So the Zionist entity will be the largest power in the region and the biggest power, and everybody just want the to be friend with this entity.
So divide and conquer.
Exactly, exactly, and that's what they did already. So the coming time for Syria, I'm telling you, it's uncertain yet. We don't know. But for myself, I don't think it's gonna be a stable situation. When they get inside Damascus and the cities, the glory and the human rights and the symbols they are talking about. We don't want to kill anybody. We want to build our country. Every time you hear these symbols, and after that you understand that the fact is worse than that. The fact is that they have lots of fight on power, different groups. We're talking about tens of groups now joining each other for a reason. After they take over the power, we will see lots of fight and lots of tragedy happening in Syria.
Yeah, so they have a common goal and a common enemy now in the Syrian Arab government of Bashar al-Assad. And once this is gone, then the glue that keeps them together, so to speak, is also gone. And then you're saying this will likely revert back into a new stage of the civil war.
Exactly, exactly. And this is what we are afraid from. And this is what will bring more and more refugees from Syria leaking out of the country all over the world. And I'm telling you that the future was not good, but now it's worse.
Yeah, I have seen, like you mentioned, the human rights rhetoric that they are proclaiming now and democracy and stuff. I've already seen pictures, I believe, in Aleppo with militants hanging out Taliban flags. So that's
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Some groups will be angry with this flag, so they will fight, and some group will support this flag and fight, and it's gonna be chaos because there is no leadership about among these people. There's different countries supporting different groups, and but we can say that the main supporter now is Turkey, the Turkish government. They are the ones who controlling, let's say, more or less, these groups. There is no 100% control, as I told you. They are radical Islamic. So you don't know, you can't expect their reactions, what the next they are going to do. Controlling these people and controlling the land of Syria, the massive land of Syria, is not easy. There's no power can do that. The symbol of Bashar al-Assad as a leader was holding on as a son of Hafiz al-Assad, and he has a historical history with ruling Syria, and he has a base of supporters among the people. So the name of Bashar al-Assad was gathering people together. Now, after he's gone, we can't expect what's coming. I expect lots of chaos. We faced lots of chaos in the last 13 years, but I think we are facing 10 or 13 more years of chaos and tragedy in Syria, unfortunately.
Do you think that this situation might actually lead to the creation of an independent Syrian Kurdistan? Of course, the Kurds are, I believe, quite sympathetic to the Zionist entity as well. So there might well be support for that among the imperialist powers, right?
They are supported by the imperialist power already, and actually they established by the Americans, and they're announcing that. They said that we announced the Kurdish battalions to support the democracy and the high values and so on. So, and to fight the terrorism of ISIS as well. So, I don't think the Kurds will get their own state as an independent state, but I think the Kurdish, or the area that the Kurdish are controlling in Syria, will face the same fate of the Kurdish in Iraq, which is they have an entity but not a country. They control their land, the land that they are controlling. It's not their land, of course. They are controlling the region of what they called Rojava, or the east of Euphrates River. And they will, of course, normalize with the Zionist entity and make a good relation and trading, and get supported by the US. They are friends with the Zionist entity anyway, and they will be protected by the United States from the Islamic radical groups, which is take in Damascus today. Maybe we'll face some battles between them, but I think this region of Syria, of East Euphrates, controlled by the Kurds, will be the most stable region in Syria, just as happened in Iraq. The northern Iraq, which is the Kurdish region in Iraq, also was the most stable region in Iraq. I think they will do the same thing in Syria, but Syria will be divided, but not officially. Like they're not going to have their own state, the Kurds, but they will have their own entity.
Who will end up in charge of Syria after this? Who will end up being recognized as the legitimate government by the international community?
I think Syria is facing the fate of Somalia. The ruler is the chaos, and there will be a puppet government recognized by the United Nations, taking empty decisions, normalizing with Israel, whatever, and they will be completely puppets, doing nothing but attending meetings. The Syrian land, the Syrian regions will be governed by the war princes and war leaders. And this is for the next 10, 20 years, we don't know, but you can look at Somalia and see this type, or this stereotype of ruling. No government, failed state, no services for the people. The war princes and the war leaders are ruling each his region, his piece of land, and a chaos we are expecting in Syria. There will not be any stability. The puppet government, just for showing the people that it's a democratic government, it's a human right government, and this government is recognizing Israel and is helping Israel to defend itself. So this government will be a nice government and good and all these things.
Right. Well, that is a grim prospect, but I thank you for your insights, and well, maybe at some point in the future we can discuss the further developments.
Of course, thank you so much. But the last thing I want to talk about is how this happened in Syria. Of course, as I said, the siege on Syria and the sanctions played a big role, but it seems that there was a deal with the Syrian military to do what they did, to withdraw the Syrian army and giving Damascus and the Syrian cities without fighting to the terrorist opposition. And I think this is paid for by the United States and Turkey. Unfortunately, part of the Syrian people, they saw that they have a black tunnel with blocked or dead end with the Syrian regime because of the sanctions and because of all the hard situation happened in Syria. At the same time, this deal happened with a part of the Syrian regime just to give the cities without fighting and end up the regime. But unfortunately, if they consider the Syrian regime as bad, what's coming is much, much, much worse. Like the Iraqi people was very looking for Saddam Hussein's time. Till now, Syrian will do the same. Like the people of Libya is looking for the Gaddafi time, the people of Syria will look for Bashar al-Assad time. Unfortunately, we don't learn the lesson. We're still taking by the Western propaganda, and we will never be stable and liberated until we raise our awareness and we know our enemy from our friend.
Right. Thank you. And can you finally mention where people can find your work and your organization?
It's Anti-Zionism and Racism. You can say Anti-Zionism and Racism on Instagram or Facebook, and now we are working on getting back our website.
All right. I'll put those links in the description, and thank you very much.